Hi, this is Russell Rowe, and we are going to be talking about the Myers-Briggs Temperaments today. And this is going to be one of a series of videos looking at different personality systems. So the temperaments were actually developed many years ago, way back when, by Hippocrates, and he came up with 4 different temperaments. And then since then they've been developed further and further, and a guy named David Keirsey is the one that has developed the temperaments the most in the 21st century anyway. The 20th century, sorry. And so he named them the artisan, the guardian, the idealist, and the rational. So these are the ones that we're going to be looking at today. And they fit into the Myers-Briggs system, which I'm going to also be talking about later. So I'm going to sort of put them into the context of the Myers-Briggs system, okay? So in the Myers-Briggs system, there are 4 pairs of preferences. Everyone has all of these preferences, okay? There's the preference between extroversion and introversion. There's the preference between sensing and intuition, the preference between thinking and feeling, and the preference between judging and perceiving, okay? And we're going to be looking at that just a little bit. Then, because you can get a combination of each of these different preferences, you actually end up with 16 different Myers-Briggs types. And there are 8 different mental functions that we can use, which is a little bit more advanced concept, but I just wanted to introduce you to it. And then finally we have the 4 Myers-Briggs temperaments, which can be made from these different combinations of preferences. Everyone has these different preferences, and no one is all extroversion and no introversion. No one is all introversion and no extroversion. Each of us has a range, and some of us are more comfortable being extroverted and some of us are more comfortable being introverted. Okay, so we just have a preference. And so the extroversion and introversion preference says, how do you prefer to get energized? Do you get energized by spending time with people? If you go to a party, when you finish that party and come home, are you energized and sort of wound up and raring to go? Or does being at the party somewhat drain your energy and you need to be alone to recharge your batteries? That's just one example of the difference between extroversion and introversion. The next preference is between sensing and intuition. And this is how we prefer to take in information. Sensors prefer to take in information using their 5 senses. What they can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell is what they believe in. They tend to be very practical, realistic, and sensible. Versus intuitives tend to take in information using their 6th sense, their hunches, their intuition. They tend to be more theoretical, imaginative, and insightful. And so these are very different ways of taking in information. Okay? The next one is how we make decisions. Thinkers have a preference for making decisions using logic, analysis, weighing the pros and cons, pulling themselves out of the equation and making the fair, just, right decision based on their head. Okay? Versus feelers put themselves into someone else's shoes, feeling what someone else is feeling, and make decisions using their heart, using mercy, using compassion for how this decision is going to affect the other person. All right? Different ways of making decisions. And of course, again, we all do both, but we just have a preference for one over another. And then the other preference that we can have is how we prefer to structure our life. Judgers prefer to structure their life in a planned, organized, decided way where they have things settled, and they like to have a to-do list and get as many things done on that to-do list as possible. They like to have an agenda for how they're going to get things done and when they're going to get things done. And if that agenda or schedule gets thrown off slightly, it throws them off balance a little bit. Okay? Versus perceivers are much more spontaneous and go with the flow, and they like to do things have options and do different things as the opportunity arises. So they may have one thing scheduled, but if something better comes up, then they're going to put off the thing that they were planning to do something better. All right? So that would be a perceiver way of living. Much more easygoing, go with the flow. All right, so these are the 4 pairs of opposite preferences. Remember, extroversion or introversion, sensing or intuition, thinking or feeling, and judging or perceiving. Those are the 4 sets of preferences. And again, we all use all 8 preferences. All right, so now to form a Myers-Briggs type, and there are 16 different Myers-Briggs types, what we do is we take one letter from each of those pairs of preferences. Okay, so for example, I'm an INFJ. So that means that I prefer introversion. That's how I get energized. It's just a preference. And then intuition is how I prefer to take in information. Feeling is how I prefer to make decisions. And judging is how I prefer to structure my life. Okay? But you could be any combination of these. So you could be an ESTP. Or you could be an INFJ. Or, any combination of these. It's not the opposites. It's any combination. And so when you do that, what you end up with is you end up with 16 different Myers-Briggs types. And here are the 16 different Myers-Briggs types. And what I've done is I've actually broken them up into the 4 different temperaments. The first list of Myers-Briggs types there, you'll notice all have an N and a T in their Myers-Briggs type. That means that they're all intuitive thinkers. Intuitive thinkers are very rational. And so that creates one of the temperaments called the rationals. The next set there is, you'll notice that those 4 Myers-Briggs types all have the letters N and F in them. And N and F again the N stands for intuition. They use N for intuition because I was already taken for introversion. And then F is for feeling. So all 4 of those Myers-Briggs types are called intuitive feelers. Also, that temperament is also known as idealists. We're going to talk about each of these in just a moment. Then the next set are called the next 4 Myers-Briggs types have the letter S and J in them, you'll notice. And that stands for sensing, judging. And sensing judgers have things in common with each other. And that creates the temperament called the guardians. And then the last one, you'll notice that all 4 of those Myers-Briggs types have the letters S and P in them. And that creates the temperament, the artisans. They're sensing perceivers. So we're going to talk about the different temperaments today, but I wanted to let you know that it fits into the larger structure of the Myers-Briggs system where there are 16 different types. Okay? Because we're also going to talk about the Myers-Briggs types later. Alright, so your temperament describes the fundamental needs, values, and desires that motivate you. So this is the core of who you are. And there are 4 different Myers-Briggs types for each of these different temperaments. But this is really what drives you. So each of these 4 Myers-Briggs types will have, or each of these different temperaments will have a lot of things in common with each other when you have the same temperament. People who have different Myers-Briggs types but the same temperament have the same basic needs, values, and desires that motivate them. Keep that in mind. Mental functions is a much more advanced concept, so I'm going to skip that, but I just wanted to let you know that you create 8 different mental functions from the different Myers-Briggs types. So again, the 4 different temperaments, and there are different names that you can use for these. Okay, the names that David Keirsey gave the 4 temperaments originally was guardians, artisans, rationals, and idealists. But guardians are also sometimes called security seekers, and there's even a color code for them, and they would be the golds in the color code. And then the artisans are also called action seekers. In the color system, they would be orange. And the rationals are also known as knowledge seekers, and in the color system, they would be green. And then the last one are the idealists, and they're also called ideal seekers, and their color would be blue. So sometimes you may hear of the true color system, and so they will use those colors instead. Alright, as I was saying before, all of the guardians, all of the people who have the guardian temperament have the letters S and J in their Myers-Briggs types. All of the artisans have the letters S and P. All of the rationals have the letters N and T, and all of the idealists have the letters N and F.